It is the 14th of April 2015, and this is the audio podcast, show 148, Return Orc Streams.
Indeed it is, Scott. That was Scott Hewitt, and I'm Adam Yench. No Sam Freeman today. Just couldn't find him. No idea.
No, he just vanished.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to have a shorter show today. We're going to run through some news. We've got a Plunder item. And show notes. You can head to theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/148 for today's show notes with links to all of the relevant articles.
Ooh, relevant articles, you say?
Elephant articles.
Excellent stuff. Well, first of all, to get us started, here in the UK, it was announced that we are going to have once more an official vinyl chart. I say once more because I guess the original singles chart and album chart was a vinyl single and albums chart, but now, as well as there will now be a vinyl specific chart. How about that?
That sounds.
What do you think?
Sounds it. I heard about this yesterday on the radio, and I was like, okay, yeah, fine. It doesn't. I don't think I've got a strong opinion because it doesn't affect me in any way. If people want to have a vinyl chart, let them have a vinyl chart. I'm more kind of thinking, why would you have a streaming chart? Considering that you can game a streaming system, it doesn't require anyone to actually buy something and put their money where their mouth is, effectively. But that's a
different question. Well, apparently vinyl albums last year as sales were 1.5% of all UK albums sold were vinyl last year.
So I imagine that must be a bit of a rebound, considering. So on the radio yesterday, I heard them say that vinyl was considered a dead format. Well, obviously not anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely selling, isn't it? And I guess it's not only is it selling, but it's people are willing to pay substantially more than any other format to get it, aren't they?
Indeed. And it's not just a nostalgic thing. So I don't think it's just those who were brought up with vinyl, but I think there's also a younger set who are getting into it. And it's an interesting one because I was talking to my partner about record players. She said to me, because we walked past the record an audio shop where we live, and she said, they're selling an obsolete format there, like a player for an obsolete format. And I understand that perspective, but I understand why people I can understand why there is a vinyl revival, because there's nothing quite like it, and it's got its own set of benefits, its own set of drawbacks, and perhaps people are a bit tired of digital. Maybe they want to enjoy music in that way. I'm not sure, but I was trying to put up an argument for it not being an obsolete format anymore because it's obviously becoming relevant again.
That's very true. I'm saying an observation I would have is looking at the official vinyl album chart for the first quarter of this year. Chasing Yesterday by Noel Gallagher, and Noel Gallagher's High Flying is number 1, but then number 2 is Led Zeppelin, number 10 is Led Zeppelin, number 6 is Bob Dylan, number 7 is Pink Floyd.
Are those classic albums? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So The Dark Side of the Moon is number 7. So.
Okay, so they must have re-released that recently. I can see why people would buy that. And I heard that Lulu also has a vinyl single that might be top of the vinyl singles chart.
It isn't on this one, but I've got the quarter 1 sales figures here.
Okay.
Not the.
Yeah, this might be I think this is the week by week I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If there is a week by week one.
Well, there we go. The official UK chart has begun, so there will be a vinyl sales figure released every week now. I'm saying it's one of the benefits of this, I guess, isn't it? Is that we're actually going to be able to tell. When you announce you're going to have a chart like this, then you kind of commit yourselves commit yourself to kind of issuing these sort of numbers and and making them available. So we're going to find out how many vinyl albums are actually being sold, and that'd be quite interesting to see and get those kind of figures for it as well. If I remember correctly, I think it is also Record Store Day on Saturday as well, though I don't have notes to that effect, but I seem to remember what it is.
It's likely to be. It's in April sometime, and it's in April. Now, other good news is that the podcasting patent, which we have talked about previously on the audio podcast, I can't remember which show, has been struck down, which is incredible news. This is one of these dodgy patents that was granted by the patent office in the States, and has been used to target podcasters. Basically, it's basically a patent that says this is how you can create a playlist, a centralized playlist for episodic content, and it's basically an abstract idea that someone is trying to claim as their own invention, even though they didn't invent that idea. So excellent news that it's been struck down by the courts in the States. Yeah.
Great news, Sony. We first mentioned it on show 88. How about that, of the audio podcast?
Quite a while ago.
Which was just after the first shakedowns had occurred, and just as the EFF was announcing its intent to go after to defend this formally, and was seeking funding. So it was quite a long time ago, and it was the judge in the case in the hearing of it has found in favor of the Electronic Freedom Foundation.
That's good. Is this the one where the EFF did a bit of crowdsourcing to fund because the original guy that the patent holders targeted was a podcaster, but he actually didn't make a huge amount of money from podcasting, so it was a pointless thing for the patent holders to do. But then the EFF came in and they sought crowdfunding to sort this out, and I think the patent holder tried to get the lawsuit thrown out because it was crowdfunded or something bizarre like that.
There were lots of weird elements to this. Over the last week or so, lots of little details came out from various places as people have felt able to kind of free and things like that. It was so there's been lots of interesting things. Leo Laporte on the Twit network on Sunday was letting everybody know that he'd been approached for $1.5 million, and after taking some legal advice, discovered his defense was going to be about $1 million, and therefore was preparing to defend as well. And they eventually never actually approached him or made a formal request in any way.
That's a poor bit of strategy by them, because the whole point of patent trolling, and this is patent trolling, the whole point of it is that you set the amount that you want to take from whoever it is you're trolling to be less than the amount it takes to litigate the case. Yeah. And then it's like, well, what's the point in spending more to litigate and perhaps lose? You could settle. But the problem is, I think that podcasting isn't as lucrative as it was first considered to be. So, but it doesn't matter. I believe the patent's been struck off now, so it can't be used anymore. Another good victory for those against patent trolls.
Patent trolls, indeed. So it was a good victory, certainly. So you can actually read the full decision. It's about 30 pages long online if you want to. So if you're interested, you can have a look at that as well. And I'd probably recommend it, actually. If you've got an interest in this, I'd probably recommend giving it a little read, because you can actually plow your way through it in kind of 20 minutes. You can skim read it quite easily, and it's kind of alarming and a good reminder as to why these kind of things are a real concern for us, even if they are a little bit away from our core interest.
Well, I mean, this one is interesting to us because it's specifically about podcasting, but there's a lot of dodginess happening with patents around this time. It's been happening for a while, but recently it's really kind of come up, and there's been a lot of fighting back from the EFF and some other institutions for trying to sort it out, and they're trying to push. I mean, it's significantly a US problem. So there's been some attempt also to put laws in place to limit or help the defender in these kinds of cases, because at the moment it seems being skewed towards those with patents.
Well, yeah, there's a big difference between the way that the European and British and the American patent system works. And the way the American patent system works is that you basically present a patent to the patent office, who are under-resourced to the extent where they concede that most of the time they don't even read them. And they actually just grant the patent. So you submit whatever you want to them, and unless it's very obviously a problem, they will just grant you the patent, which means that the patent will then is essentially valid until disproven, which is then the point where you end up in a court, or in a situation as ended up here, where somebody ends up in a court to argue over whether a patent that's been granted is actually valid. So being granted a patent doesn't actually mean anything other than you have the ability to go to court to prove it's correct. And that's where
the problem now is that there are lots of companies that are set up specifically to do this. So they're called patent
trolls.
That's the colloquial term. There's another term I can't remember the name of. But they're basically like shell companies that have no products. They do nothing but acquire patents and then use them to force money out of people. It's a pretty despicable practice, I think. That it's not quite as black and white as that, though, because there's usually some inventor at the other end who believes that they've been wronged, or they've been influenced into believing they're wronged by this company. So yeah, and you're right, Scott. The problem is the under-resourced patent office, which they don't really have the resources to go through these things in detail, and it comes back to bite people in the future, which is a shame. But if you're interested in this kind of, it's a bit off topic for us in general. If you're interested in this kind of thing, Ars Technica do cover these kind of patent disputes regularly, and they're happening all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, if we go on then, so we got a final element of news, because we like to keep ourselves to 3 pieces of news. Well, in the current format, we're keeping ourselves to 3 pieces of news. HISSandaROAR have announced the release of a sample library called SWISH 2, which is 28 gigs of Dopplers and swishes and whoops and noises of that sort, all recorded at 192 kilohertz, as you would expect from them.
Yay. So another patent library, sample library. We haven't had a sample library for a while in our new news format, but yeah, this has got an interesting video that we've got linked on the audio podcast notes for this week, and from the promo picture, it looks like it's a bunch of different types of stuff. So you can head to our notes, theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/148, and read up on that.
Cool, lots of love. Also, this week, things that happened this week as well, which are also in the news on the audio podcast, but not on the show itself. But Propellerhead updated Take to version 2. Exis Lab launched MiniSynth X, and Cubase Elements 8 also appeared as well. Just a summary of the news that failed to make the news.
Well, yeah, but it's good to know the little tidbits. So, no feature again this week. So we'll just go straight through to Plunder. And it's a new app by Propellerhead for iOS called Figure.
Well, not actually a new app. Rather, Figure has become free.
Ah, okay. Is this going to be forever, or is it just a limited period? Or
it is forever. I've left my iPad on the other side of the room, so it's a bit impractical for me to get it because of my layout. But it's actually a lot of fun. I've been playing with it since it was announced maybe last week or the week before that it was going to be free. And I would definitely recommend this to you as a fun way to just kind of, it's a lot of, it's a fun thing. It does have a couple of interesting visual elements. So if you're interested in the representation of time and things like this in kind of iOS music apps, and there's a couple of interesting features to it as well, which are quite nice. And if you're interested in ideas of notation as well, then I think there's notational significances to it as well. That sound weird as kind of points of focus, but it records when it plays back. It demonstrates the finger presses that you've done to make it play back the way it plays back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's representations of the things things move on the screen as if you'd moved them with your finger, which I think was something that struck me as a really nice way of notating what was happening. So I liked that a lot. That was cool.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. Okay, so we just head to the App Store and you can play with that. Is there a it's been made free, but is there in-app purchases, or is it just all there?
It's not so much in-app purchase. Well, I don't believe there's. I think there are optional ones, but certainly I made an entire track without being asked at any point to hand over any money, which is cool. You do have to get it off the device. You have to join the kind of Propellerhead club, which appeared to be free as well. But at that point, I wasn't really, I was meant to be doing something else, so I just carried on doing something else. Yeah.
So you have to have a Propellerhead account to transfer what you've done to another platform, effectively.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And I mean, with that, we come to the end of the show. You can see, if you're on the YouTube version, you can see in my picture, I've got a host of pedals.
Very nice.
I don't need to ask you what you think they are, because you can pretty much see most of them there.
Indeed so.
At the top is my volume pedal that I used to use in Hilo PG.
Oh, wow. So how about that? Yeah. Give it a history. And I am just myself. That's basically it.
Yeah. As usual.
As usual.
Which is a good thing. Okay, people, good to have a show with you. It's been a short one, but it's been nice to come back and do some more. When do you think the next show is, Scott?
Is it not next Tuesday?
It might be next Tuesday.
It might be next Tuesday. Let's see. Let's plan for next Tuesday, but with the intention to immediately replan it if need be. This has been the audio podcast, show 148. Don't forget, if you want the show notes, at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/148. And if you want to contact with us, you'll find all our contact details there. We'd love to get your email and other things like that as well. I've been Scotia. I've had a great yet brief time.
I've been Adam Yanch. I shall continue to be Adam Yanch, and we will reconvene with you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.